Hey, real quick, before we get into that episode, do us a favor and subscribe to our channel. That way you don't miss out on any marketing nuggets. Enjoy the show.
Every article you read talks about burnout, but it's because it's so prevalent. Right. There are these like shared leadership models so that that are kind of disrupting that and saying, you know what, you don't have to be burnt out or stressed or overworked or overwhelmed in order to be a leader.
Hi, I'm Josh Owen. As the owner of a video marketing company in New Orleans, I've been on the quest to learn everything I can about marketing. Everyone has a different style, different strategy, and a different experience. Is there a wrong way to do it? A right way to do it? Let's find out together as we make marketing make sense. Welcome back, everybody, to another fantastic episode of Make Marketing Make Sense. Today, I am joined by the boss lady, Lauren Siegel, managing director at Trepwise. Fantastic having you on the show. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, well, today we're going to talk about redefining business leadership because I know that's been a big passion of yours and something that you've been very heavily invested in the recent times of your 8.5-year tenure doing this thing. So fantastic. I mean, just to jump right in, you know, what to you is some of the issues with traditional organizational structures in business?
Yeah, so I've met with a lot of leaders and looked at a lot of companies and organizations, nonprofit, for-profit, employee-owned, you know, top-down, bottom-up, all the different things. And I think
down, left, right.
There is a traditional view of structure in a company, a traditional view of leadership and power that just really isn't serving us anymore. And so what that traditional philosophy is that the leader at the top, right? We think of an organization traditionally as like a pyramid. It has power over all the other people in that pyramid. And that is power over versus power with. And so I think we are moving into a world now for a number of different factors, which we can talk about or not talk about.
The nitty-gritty.
Where power with is becoming a necessary way to do business. And so the problem with that power over is a couple things. One, you've got one person at the top who's supposed to decide what's right for everything else that happens in the company at every level. How is that possible? That puts so much pressure on that one person. And so what we're seeing in the news is like these CEOs just getting ripped down because this traditional view is they're supposed to know, understand, be able to make decisions, take action for everyone else in that company or organization. And that's just not realistic. And then the second thing that happens is like you're really, in following that model, kind of neglecting that you've got all of these amazing people on your team that have incredible talents that work every day in the business, in the organization. They see what's going on. They often know best what is happening at their level. And so with that traditional view of a power structure, power over, there's not a lot of information coming from the folks that are on the ground doing the work back up to leadership. And I mean, that is an extreme, right? There's different flavors and variations of that. And I think it's something that every organization can work on. But as far as like the extreme of that traditional view of power, that power over can be very damaging for the leader and then for the people who don't feel valued, included. Like their work matters. And what that leads to is a few different things. If you're lucky, it leads to disengagement where the people just don't work as hard, right? If you're unlucky or if it goes on too far, people may leave, or even worse, they may stay and poison the well or do something unethical and illegal because they feel like, well, my work doesn't matter. I'm just going to take care of myself. And so those are pretty big problems for any size company, any size organization.
Yeah, that scorched earth policy. It's just, it's not very conducive to a good work relationship. So what do you have a name that you're giving this kind of new method that you're trying to put out there?
Yeah, so I think what we like to describe it as is like shared leadership. And so there's kind of like a spectrum of shared leadership. There's obviously an extreme on either end, right? And one extreme is we are a complete organizational structure that has been designed so that we have co-CEOs or co-executive directors, or we have a committee, or it's employee owned, right? Those are extreme, not in the way that they're like extreme, but in the way that like that is kind of a far end of the spectrum.
Right.
And then we've got kind of the lighter end of the spectrum, which is making sure that people's perspectives, their experiences, their skills, their talents, the things that they're learning and practicing every day on the job are brought into the decision making at the top in one way or another. And that could be informal, or it could be structured, and there's a number of different ways that looks.
Because it is, and kind of building this out too, how does these things really start to help the business itself, as far as like making, impacts in the, by building representation, making impacts in the business itself in its day-to-day activities? What are some of the metrics that you see utilizing this?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is something that we have worked to implement with, like I said, like thousands of people working in an organization and 5 people working in an organization.
Next, so yeah.
Okay. Well, we can get there.
We'll come back to it,
But I think, and they measure things differently, right? One may be more effective or more kind of religious in their measurement than others. But basically what we see is a number of things. I think first and foremost, you show people that leadership values their service to that company. And what that does is make them bought in so that they know I've informed this big decision, whether it's to launch a new product or, even close a division or try something new. I have brought input to this decision. Therefore, I have like a little slice of ownership in its success. And I am bought in to working, being productive, having my value added to making it work. And that actually brings about a ton of pride in what people do.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of one aspect of it, is like making people feel like they matter in their work. The second aspect of it is taking the pressure off of that leader. I mean, burnout, right? It's upsetting to me that it's like a buzzword now. That it's just like every article you read talks about burnout, but it's because it's so prevalent. Right. It's like we breathe oxygen, we feel burnout. Like it's just part of the human cycle now. I don't personally think that the future of work should be that way for leaders, because it's going to eventually discourage people to lead. And so I think there are these like shared leadership models so that that are kind of disrupting that and saying, you know what, you don't have to be burnt out or stressed or overworked or overwhelmed in order to be a leader. Which is so ironic that I'm saying this and walked in here and was like, it's been a crazy week and I'm so stressed and burnt out. But anyway.
That being said, though, not to say that it's not possible, but you're burned out on trying to get everyone else to be burned out.
Exactly. To not be burned out.
To not be burned out.
Absolutely. So that's the second piece, is really showing leaders, hey, you don't have to bear all of the pressure. Right. They still may be the accountable party, but kind of like diversifying where they get their information, diversifying the responsibility for making those decisions is such a relief, I will say. In my own experience, I've felt that, and I've seen leaders that I work with in formal engagements or through coaching get to that point where they're like, oh, I don't have to know everything and exactly what to do all the time. I'm just one person. The third thing is that this kind of shared leadership, as we're calling it, is incredibly helpful for having authentic equity, belonging, inclusion in your organization. So not, we raise a flag and we post something on social media. It's not performative. It's actually building the diversity of voices that you have access to into the design of your organization. And, obviously you need to have some checks and balances to make sure that that's being done fairly. But it really is a great pathway for building an organization that is working to further equity and be a better place to work, where people are just happy doing their job. Everyone, from the top down to the bottom up.
Yeah. I mean, when you say that, it really resonated with me because especially when you were talking about like discouragement from people, I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, I've thought of people in my past in that moment where there are people that, especially when it's like, hiring up from within, someone saying like, oh, I don't really want to take that job because it's almost isolating. Like I almost feel isolated because it's like I was once comrades with all my fellow peers and now I'm being promoted up and now I have to have this whole different dynamic. And then I'm like, and I'm no longer a part of the camaraderie anymore.
Completely. And that's such a good example because why do people often get promoted up? Because they're highly skilled at the task they are doing every day.
Right.
Not because they're good at managing other people to do that task.
Yeah.
That is a
different skills.
Huge disconnect.
Yeah.
Right? So like someone at the top or near the top decided, this person's so good at their job, we should promote them.
Yeah.
But didn't say, how do we first see if they're actually good at management, if they have a knack for it, if we can teach them how to do it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So again, an example that led to another example.
Yeah. Because like maybe a better thing for them is just to give them a pay raise doing the same thing they do versus just like, hey, we want to make you do this whole new job that you have never done before.
Or maybe the best thing is just asking them what they want out of this job.
Yeah.
What do you want? Like some people, I think we like assume from like, I'll speak for myself from a privileged, educated background where my parents drove like success is financial gain, that everyone wants that. And that's not the case. Some people just love what they do. They're happy doing it. They're good at it. And they just want to show up and do that every day and kind of just keep it that way, And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, no, that's for sure.
But the key is to ask them what they want.
Which is a big part of that. Well, and one thing that I was wondering about, and I'm curious too, is because sometimes I've noticed too when there's too much, I don't want to say the word like democracy, but like there's too much like, at times it can be almost halting if there's too many voices towards one thing. Within this model, how do you prevent that kind of too much voice to like basically grinding the wheels to a halt kind of aspect of things? How do you prevent that?
Yes. So I think, I know something that we are going to talk about is human-centered design or design thinking, but a big part of that practice is like piloting things and then testing them and then iterating on them. And so if you're an organization that has had like a traditional structure where the person at the top or a few people at the top or near the top have made all the decisions, this is a scary thing, right? And you can't just like open up every decision and all the books and all the things that are happening behind the scenes and say like, here you go, employees, y'all make the decisions now. It's not exactly
everyone's
how
like,
it
hey,
works.
everybody give me your input and then I'll read all of your input and then try and make a decision based on all these decisions.
Yeah. But I think step one is understanding who you have on your team as individuals. What skill sets do we have here? What talents do we have here? Who's doing amazing work here? And let's just like really understand the talent footprint that we have. And I think a kind of at the same time, what really matters to these people? And even sending out a survey once a year, twice a year, right? What really matters to you as you work here? And keeping it kind of open-ended. And that's kind of like the first step is just understanding what's happening and what people care about, what they're seeing, what they're noticing, what's easy for them in their work, what they're having challenges with, what they love, what they don't love, what are barriers, just simple things like that.
Yeah.
And then you can digest it. It's going to be unique for most companies, but you can digest that and say, okay, now we understand where we have some pain points. Let's start to bring in some input on that.
Yeah.
So it's not like, okay, every decision we make, we're going to open it up. But what are the decisions that people really care about?
Yeah.
That your employees are going to be very affected by?
Yeah.
And that you need to learn more about in order to make those decisions and kind of start from there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, things like, benefits.
Yeah.
Right? Companies, 3 people at the top of the company decide what the benefits are. Okay, well, that may be nice and you may actually be paying a lot of money for benefits, but are they the ones that your employees want or need?
Yeah.
And then you're paying a ton of money and no one's using them. You could use that money towards something, maybe even save money by offering them exactly what they want.
Yeah. And a lot of times too, there's like this built up like resentment coming from that,
Right.
And you're just like,
yeah.
Why do I have this? I don't even use this.
Right.
And it's just like, but you never knew that people didn't use it, because you never opened up that channel of communication.
Exactly.
Well, and I know you already alluded to it, but I am curious because you mentioned about human-centered, design. Like that's something that we talked about too, and I would love for you to kind of give that explanation as how that correlates to this as well. Like, what is that exactly, and what is what's its relationship to this model?
So I cannot take the credit for inventing human-centered design or design thinking. They're the same thing, and the words are used interchangeably. But essentially, it was this methodology created back in the 80s by an organization out in California called IDEO. Oh. And initially, it was used for UI and UX design in technology.
Interesting.
And now, it's had a number of different applications, from designing space to designing, what else? Processes, right? Like checking in at the airport, to designing how we purchase things, advertising and marketing, and of course, like employee experiences.
Yeah.
So it is essentially, it's common sense if you really think about it, but they have packaged it nicely, put a wonderful little process around it that anyone can follow, and made it into kind of a thing. But essentially, it is the practice of empathy, which is like truly connecting with what people need and want, understanding the why, and trying to contextualize that in your own life and decision making. So practice of empathy and understanding in order to design solutions or things or spaces for the people that are ultimately going to use them.
Yeah. Just being more mindful of like maximizing the ability that it needs to have to fit the needs of what it is.
And it's more intentional than mindfulness.
Yeah.
It's like taking certain actions, asking certain questions, simulating environments. Like it can get very complicated.
Yeah. Proactive mindfulness.
Yes. But the easiest thing is just asking people questions.
Yeah.
Like flat out. Let me have a conversation with you.
Yeah. You should be asking. That's basically
just ask a question.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, because I guess like, and your answer's probably it works. It's incredibly beneficial to both, but small organizations versus large organizations, I'm assuming it works incredible for, both of them, but in different ways.
Yes.
So obviously we have people probably listening that are probably from different backgrounds.
Absolutely.
And so for the smaller, I guess we can tackle one first and the other, but like for smaller organizations that sound intrigued by this, what would be some steps for them to kind of get started towards, implementing this kind of model to their own business practice?
So the good thing about small organizations is that the person at the top, let's define small as under 100?
Oh, wow. Okay.
You want to do smaller than that?
No. I was going to say under like 50, but
under 50.
Yeah.
Under 50, the person at the top could reasonably have a conversation with everyone in that company over a matter of weeks or months.
Right.
Not that that's the right solution for everyone, but that would be easy, right? Or at least focus groups or group interviews or things like that. And in that company of 50, that person at the top will probably interact with every single person in that company within a year's time.
Yeah.
And so I think in that instance, it makes it easier.
Yeah.
You have direct access to all the people that are going to be doing work for you any day, every day. Number one, that is, it's going to sound so silly, just get up and walk around. And if you're a hybrid team, figure it out. Like figure out a creative way to get up and walk around.
Everybody get on Zoom. I'm going to walk around and I want you all to watch me.
Maybe not that. But like, what if we had like a lunch and learn?
Yeah.
And we just watched the questions people asked as the CEO or the executive director. Or what if during the team meetings, we shared out what challenges we were having. And we just kind of visited each department's team meetings and listened into that. Or asked the managers, the directors to feed that back to us. And I think in that way, like just becoming aware is the easiest thing in a small company.
Well, and I was curious because, like you're saying, like one of the most important implementations of this is asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
What would be some of the best questions to ask?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, if you're just starting out on figuring out how to structure this sharing of power in your organization, the things I mentioned earlier, like what matters to you?
Mm.
What's easy? What do you love about this work? What makes you feel important here? How do you know that your work is working? And then on the flip side, like what doesn't matter to you, or what's annoying or frustrating, or what when do you feel least empowered in your work? When do you feel like, oh man, I can't do this anymore, or like I don't know if I can go to work today? What does that feel like? And look, the bottom entry level, most junior employee is not going to feel comfortable sharing that outright with their CEO, right? So you've got to figure out what the right channels are to do that. Do you have a trusted person? Do you have like a people person? Do they trust their manager a lot? Can we get a peer group together and put one of the peers in charge and say, hey, we're collecting some feedback. We're going to keep it anonymous, but we want to be able to bring that up to leadership. I think all that stuff is really easy in a small company. And look, it's not easy. It is easier in a small company because it's just easier to look everyone in the eyes.
Basically, if you think about it long enough, you'll find a solution that works.
Yeah, I mean, it's accessibility.
Yeah, it's
accessible. Right, you got access to everyone.
Right. No, that's awesome.
In a bigger company, there are a few things that we've seen them do. We have worked with an organization to create something called an innovation lab. This is actually with the convention center, which has been really cool to see them do this.
Okay.
Yeah. And it is a representative group. We asked the managers of the different departments there to kind of nominate people that they feel like should be a part of this innovation lab. It was a representative group of employees from every level of the organization, people who are regarded by their peers, seen as leaders or influencers or, really high growth potential, to get them together and say, hey, what are some of the issues that you see and hear from your fellow teammates on the floor or in your office or, when you're trying to do this or that. And really from there, design a few different projects that they can test out to make it all work.
Interesting. Yeah. So it's like you're building a system for this within that work.
And I mean, it doesn't have to be like sharing this power, sharing these decisions. It doesn't have to be like monumental. It doesn't have to be an earthquake.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that the innovation lab at the convention center realized was that employees were entering one side of the building and then they had to walk all the way down. That building is like 1.25 miles long. Had to walk all the way down to the other side to clock in.
Oh, wow.
And then had to walk back to get to the right place where they happen to work.
That's crazy,
right? So if we just put a time clock where people enter, how much time and energy does that save people?
Yeah. That's crazy.
It makes them happier.
Yeah.
And more productive.
It's the little things that add up.
It's the tiniest things.
Yeah.
Right? It was like, oh, okay, well, that's easy. We can do that.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So.
Wow. I mean, you think about that. I mean, there's probably like several shockwaves of that just send improvement through the roof.
And the biggest thing was that the people who were talking about this for years looked at that time clock and were like, yeah.
Wow.
I did that, like they heard me.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And that's really the point of it.
Wow. I can't think of a better way to end it than right there. That's perfect. Like that was great. Well, thank you so much for coming in and sharing all this on our platform. And I think a lot of people are going to have a lot more questions to ask, especially to you. So importantly, where can people find Lauren? Where can people find Trepwise on the digital sphere if they want to learn more about this?
Sure. So people can check us out on our website, www.trepwise.com. You can find me at lauren@trepwise.com. And then, we're on all the social things and out and about in the community.
Nice.
And if you're not in New Orleans, we do, a lot of support for organizations outside of our community as well. So
awesome. Well, hey, get on it. Contact Trepwise today. And we'll see you all in the next one. Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you, Josh.
Thanks for tuning into the show. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. This episode of Make Marketing Make Sense is brought to you by Comfystone. If your business needs organic social media video content, video ads, or video podcasting, hit up Comfystone at comfystone.com and follow Comfystone on Instagram and TikTok. Until next time, this is Make Marketing Make Sense.